Welcome to this week's America with an Accent. When you move to a new country, you realize that having proper documentation is just one battle. Winning the war of belonging to your new society is an everyday challenge. How do you become part of a new community? How do you gain a sense of belonging to a new society? Is the war of belonging exclusively an immigrant's war, or Americans fight it too? Mike Kelly, a native of Cincinnati, Ohio, moved to Omaha 50 years ago, almost 50 years ago, to report and write columns for the Omaha World-Herald newspaper. Now retired, Mike is preparing his return to Cincinnati. I sat down with Mike a little earlier and we shared our thoughts on our wars of belonging. Mike as an American who adopted a new city, me as an immigrant who adopted a new country. The war of belonging. Thank you, Mike, for being here today.
Happy to be here, Kayla.
All right, now I'm going to start with a very short introduction of you. I call it Mike in a nutshell. You were born in Cincinnati, one of 8 siblings, married to wife Barbara for 47 years.
Yes.
You have 4 adult children, and you both are grandparents to 10 grandchildren. Now, Mike, I would like to start with a question that I have received the most. How did you end up in Omaha? What brought you to Omaha?
Well, a job with the Omaha World-Herald. And how that came about, there was a gal who grew up in Omaha. Her family got transferred to my hometown of Cincinnati, which is about 700 miles east of here. We got to know each other through her. I met some of her friends. And when I was in college, I did what I think every college boy wants to do, spend spring break in Omaha. And I actually did that. I came out here for a week and stayed with a friend of this gal that I mentioned, who I'd met. And really, it was a wonderful week. It was a great introduction to Omaha. 3 years later, when I graduated from college, I applied to the World-Herald. I thought Omaha would be a nice place to live for 2 or 3 years, and I planted and I stayed.
Same here, but I wanted to ask you, were you married at that time when you moved to
No,
Omaha?
we were married. I went back, Barb taught for a year in Cincinnati, and we married back there a year later, and then came out here and raised our family here.
Okay, what was your first impression of Omaha?
It was great. I came here in March, and the weather was beautiful the whole week, which surprised me. Didn't think Omaha was famous for having the best weather, but it was great. We had a wonderful time. The parks were beautiful. It seemed like there was a lot to do. And I did notice this newspaper called the World-Herald. Wasn't too familiar with it. I had no idea that was going to become such an important part of my life. But I had I would say a great first impression. It was not as large as the city that I lived in. Metro area, probably half the size, but it seemed like a plenty big size city with lots of things going on.
What was the reaction of your family and Barbara when you said that I'm taking a job in Omaha?
Well, I think they were probably glad I got a job. I certainly was. And I was not a journalism major, I was a history major. So I had a lot to learn. I was very fortunate to be hired here. And but other than this one family that I knew, really didn't know anyone here. And I was leaving my entire family, lived back where I had come from. So it was a new experience. I didn't go away to college, which is an experience that we wanted all of our 4 kids to have, and they did. Barb and I both went to school in our hometown university, which is very good, just like our hometown universities here are. But I think there's an advantage to going away to college. So this was my going away for the first time, was when I started here.
What was the hardest for you to adjust to when you moved to Omaha?
I guess just not knowing people. In your first episode, you interviewed Steve Jordan, our mutual friend, who became my first friend at the paper. And the fact that I was writing for the newspaper, just by virtue of my job, kind of made me jump into and immerse myself in the city. So Steve took me on the police beat, introduced me to police officers, like first week or 2 that I was here. And you get a lot of assignments that take you around different parts of the city, meeting different kinds of people. Also got involved in something called the Press Club Show, which was a show that was run for many years, making fun of public figures and playfully. It would raise money for journalism scholarships. So you meet a lot of people that way. So I think the important thing is just get involved, church, and a lot of other things.
How long did it take for you to feel that you belong to Omaha? You belong in this new community?
I think it was the last year or so. I think I finally felt like this is a great community. I think, you know, after Barb came out a year later and we got involved in church and met more friends, I think it was pretty soon.
So you moved to Omaha by yourself first.
I was 21 years old.
And then you brought Barb with you.
A year later.
A year later, and all kids were born here in Omaha.
That's right.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you're suggesting that even for you, although you're not an immigrant like myself, you just moved 700 miles west from where you are, still it was a little challenging at first to find your place in Omaha.
Sure.
So your advice would be to get involved with communities and anything else?
I think Omaha is a very welcoming community to all people, and I've seen it. You know, I've written about immigrants, of course, over the years. I remember about 4 years ago, a family that came from Kenya, and he had a good education at the University of Nairobi, but they still lived in a very poor area there, and they were able, through immigration lottery, they were able to come to the U.S., but they didn't know anyone here. And so they did research and found 3 cities where the unemployment rate was low as Omaha. And they looked in the center of the country and said, we're going there. They didn't know anyone here. Incredible. And they land here, and a cab driver takes them to a shelter, which led to, you know, there are any number of organizations that are eager and willing to help immigrants, you know, Lutheran Family Services and Catholic Charities, the shelters, and other organizations. I'm so glad that you're starting your organization to really to help immigrants assimilate and become part of the city, because just as you and your family have added so much to Omaha, you know, that's what all of us, all of the immigrants, all have this potential, and most really do add a lot. We're a nation of immigrants.
That's very nice of you to say that, and I do think that it's a mutual relationship. We, just like you, we moved to Omaha. When we moved to Omaha in 2005, it was just for 2 years, and here we are 13 years after. We're still in Omaha, and I don't think we're going anywhere because our kids feel at home here.
Great.
They were both born here at University of Nebraska Medical Center, and they go to school here. They have their own friends. Even if I wanted, they won't agree to move to another city.
But how hard was it for you when you moved here, not knowing too many people?
I did not know not even one person. I was put in contact with Helen and Steve Jordan, our mutual friend, and didn't even visit Omaha before we moved to Omaha.
Wow.
We were students. I think we were crazy at that time a little bit, and we were young. And when he said that there is an offer for him to move and work for the UNMC, the Nebraska Medicine, former University of Nebraska Medical Center, I refused. I said no. I'm not going to Omaha, and the reason is dates back in 2001. It was Christmas time in Albania, and former American ambassador to Albania invited a group of reporters in his house to celebrate Christmas. And I am talking with his wife, Nancy, and there's a nice photo presentation on the wall. And there are 3 photos, black and white. I think I remember if they were black and white. And it looked cold and bare and flat. And she tells me, those are photos of Nebraska. This is Nebraska. And it turns out that they were both from Omaha.
This was Ambassador? Limpert?
Yes, it was Mr. Joseph Limpert.
His
Yes.
father was a longtime editor and writer at the World Herald.
The world is such a small place. And so the first reaction when my husband Alexei said that I really like that job offer in Nebraska, I was like, no, 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 I'm not going. And the reputation of Omaha and Nebraska doesn't help really. All we heard it was cows and beef and corn and all that. So I said, no, I'm not going. And then you two, I'm a big fan of you two, and I know you're Irish, or your family has roots in Ireland, and I really like the band U2. And right at the last moment, they added Omaha to their tour back in the winter of 2005. So I'm like, okay, it shouldn't be that bad then, since U2 is going to Omaha.
All right, so you two right in Omaha, great.
So we picked Omaha, and after we made our decision, back in New Mexico, where we went to school, I worked for the PBS. I was affiliated with PBS, and my friend at PBS, they said that it was a good choice. From a PBS perspective, Omaha was a great choice.
Because your background was in television in Albania, right?
Yes.
You were an anchor there, is that right?
Yes, I did. I started as a reporter for the public television of Albania. And then they asked me to anchor. Wasn't really my desire, but it turned out I really liked it. And then I hosted a morning program, and I came to the United States, not like the family from Kenya. I was part of a research program, actually exchange program through the Voice of America and the State Department. The State Department and the Voice of America had built a program with New Mexico State University. And this is how I ended up in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Did you grow up speaking English at all in Albania?
No, I did not.
Now, the name of this program is America with an Accent, and you have a beautiful accent. And
Thank you.
do you think for immigrants that accent, is it a plus, a minus, or neither?
To me, until lately, it has been something that hasn't worked in my favor. Until I changed my perspective. I think that was my perspective, and I think when I changed my own perspective towards it, things have changed. And when my friends asked me, I said, the accent has been my enemy, now I'm making it my weapon.
And you chose that as the title for your program.
Yes.
That's great, because it's sort of metaphorical too. It's not just your accent speaking. Immigrants add accent to our society.
Yeah, that's right. Well, language is the main barrier, really. When you move to a new country, language is the main barrier. And once you conquer that, you start feeling more at home. You start feeling that you can carry on a conversation. You are confident to ask directions, and so it makes you feel better. It makes you feel rooted in the new place, or it opens the door for you to feel rooted, because rooted it's a very big word and rather hard to achieve. Do you feel you have rooted in Omaha, Mike?
Oh yes, I mean, since I've been here 48 years, I feel like this is my home, although I still have family in Cincinnati and plan to go back there. I've kind of lived in two cities, mainly Omaha, but since I have so many relatives, in fact 2 of our 4 children, 5 of our 10 grandchildren live back there, so I'll be going back there, but really staying in Omaha a lot too, I think, or visiting here.
So you have shared your life between Cincinnati and Omaha the whole time, is that right?
Yes, for
even
a lot of
physically,
the time.
not only
right. I mean, I've lived here. I've owned a home here, paid taxes here. This is where I've lived, but I have spent a lot of time going back and forth, for sure. And I still have, even though I just bought a T-shirt. It said once a Nebraskan, always a Nebraskan. So I'll proudly wear that in Cincinnati when I'm back there. But of course, I still have loyalties to my hometown too, like the sports teams, the Cincinnati Reds, the Bengals, my college, Cincinnati Bearcats, but I'm a Husker fan too.
So if the two teams are playing against each other, what's your favorite?
That is a good question. Like if Nebraska played Cincinnati, I'd root for Cincinnati.
For Cincinnati.
Yeah, but I mean, other than that, I mean, I'm a big Husker fan, but that's...
And you've written about Huskers, isn't that right?
Yes,
For a long time.
I spent 10 years in the middle of my career as sports editor and sports columnist. It wasn't a job that I had sought because I came here as a news reporter. I covered the police department, courts, county, city hall for a number of years. And I'd like to say I was minding my own business one day when our managing editor at the time, Bob Pierman, the late Bob Pierman, offered me my choice of some jobs, one of which was sports editor and sports columnist. So I did that for about 10 years, and then I returned to the news section, and for the last quarter century or so, I've written kind of a general interest, human interest column, which is a really wonderful job that allows you to really cover the waterfront, covering all kinds of issues, people all over our community.
And I think what you have been doing for a living has really helped you belong to Omaha.
Oh, absolutely.
It is.
You write for a newspaper, I mean, you are necessarily immersed in your community, and I can't imagine doing something that I would have loved more than what I have done.
How about your family? Did they feel rooted or they belong to the society as much as you do? And I'm asking you because from my own perspective, until I gain a purpose for myself, to do something for myself, I was in a limbo. Every time I would go and visit my parents in Albania and it was time to fly back to the United States, I would go, oh my God, why am I doing this? I'm good where I am. And then once I found a purpose for myself here in the last 2 visits was I want to go home, I want to go home. Is it the case for your family too? Did they feel as rooted as you
Our
did?
family is all spread out. I wish everybody were here, but each for their own reasons, not because they didn't like Omaha. 2 of them ended up in Cincinnati, have one in Orlando. He married a gal who got a job. She's a career Disney person, so that's where you go, is Orlando. They met in college in Indiana at Purdue, and they have 3 children down there, and he works for, he's a software engineer for a defense contractor. Her daughter Bridget lives in New York, has 2 children there. So, you know, everybody makes their own way. But Cincinnati is kind of home base for our family. I'm one of 8, my wife's the oldest of 11, so it's natural to go there. But I certainly want to keep my connections to Omaha for the rest of my life.
What has been the hardest moment for you being away from your family?
I think it's been hard just for some family moments, you know, especially when you're raising your kids and they're all in school. Especially Barb missed some family things that she couldn't get back for. Later years, you know, it's been easier, but it's those family things and not being there. We always would made it back there for holidays and so on,
Yeah.
as much as we could, but
Yeah.
wasn't easy.
No, it's a feeling or something that I live every day, and especially with both parents being still around, I dread the moment that I will receive a phone call and they will say that, you know, one of your parents not doing well, and I try to fight the thought of thinking about flying over the Atlantic for 8 hours or 9 hours and what I would do if that thing happens. So it's not easy. It's not easy to...
But your husband, Alexei, of course, is also an immigrant. He's from Russia, and,
Yes.
and he's a professor. You know, the medical center, and he's now at UNO, right?
He's with both,
Both?
but mainly
Oh,
at
good.
UNO.
He's a
yeah.
scientist. And the universities here are great centers of immigration, aren't they?
Yes,
I mean,
they are.
And in a very, very positive way for our community.
Yes, and they have been very supportive of my husband and his efforts, and the support for his ideas has been great. He feels at home at UNO and UNMC. He's mainly stationed at UNO, but he works for UNMC as well.
But all immigrants who come here, and you know, we have a great history in Omaha I know you've talked about, South Omaha has been kind of the traditional front door to Omaha for immigrants for ever since the beginning of the city. But in more recent years, I think we've talked about more refugee immigrants have come here. What's been your experience with them? Have they been welcomed? Have they found opportunities?
I cannot speak from a refugee's perspective, but Omaha definitely, Omaha is a good place to be, to live in. And being that an immigrant or an American as well. But from an immigrant's perspective, I think at first it was a little hard for me to be part of the community. Things have changed when kids entered school. This is when I started feeling that, yes, I know faces. And I used to make a joke that before I would go to a grocery store and just like with my sweatshirts and all that. And then when kids started school, I would see a teacher at the grocery store and I'm like, oops, I really have to change when I go out right now. So having children at school, children having their friends, having this circle of friends and families, definitely has made me feel more like at home here. I haven't gone through the challenge of that other immigrants or refugees may have when come to the United States and don't know anything about the country or the city for that matter. But I don't think, in general, the opinion is that Omaha and Nebraska is a conservative place and the immigrants are not welcome. That's not my thinking. I think Nebraskans and Omahans are just hardworking people that they expect the immigrants as well to be hardworking as themselves. Now, you have two examples. You have two examples here in Omaha in a short period of time, within a month or two. You had the raid up in O'Neill, Nebraska, that made national news and kind of portrayed Nebraska like they don't welcome the immigrants. But at the same time, here in the city of Omaha, you had the whole city mobilized to help the refugees that were living in an apartment complex that violated the city codes. And that was a remarkable effort of the community.
Helping the immigrants who were in terrible living conditions.
Exactly, and from the refugees' perspective, immigrants' perspective, that was just normal. But from the community's perspective, that was unacceptable. And when I saw that my kids would come home with little envelopes to donate a little bit in order to help the relocation of those families, to me that was very meaningful. So Nebraska or Omaha doesn't make an exception from the rest of the country. They're parts of the society or certain groups that are a little bit, I wouldn't say aggressive, but dislike immigration. But you have other parts of the society and different categories and societal groups that are very, very welcoming of the immigrants. So it's a good mixture, I would say, here in Omaha.
Yeah, I wrote a book 3 years ago, we're actually reprinting now, called Uniquely Omaha, and tried to cover as much as we could, a lot of photos, but a lot of short stories, but including about our great history of immigration, of where the people have come from through the years. So I'm proud of Omaha. In a lot of ways. That's not to say everything is perfect here. I mean, we've got, injustice and abuse and crime that it doesn't just extend to in poverty areas. It's often poverty related. We've abuse, recent stories in an affluent suburb, like a Catholic priest. There were allegations, at least, against him. So any city, seems like especially urban areas, is going to have problems. I mean, life isn't always easy. It really isn't. But there are a lot of people here to help.
And this is the bottom line. Actually, the war of belonging is not just the war of an immigrant. I think it's the war of a person who wants to be part of a community, who wants to make the new place a home.
That's an interesting phrase, war of belonging. You have to fight to belong.
Yep, that is right.
It's worth the fight, though. I mean,
I do agree with that. I do agree with that. It is worth the fight. It opens a new door to a new world for a person. Thank you, Mike, for being here today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Kayla.
Now it's time for letters to Andy. Dear Andy, greetings from Omaha. Last week was Halloween, and I hope you had a good one. Mine was okay. First of all, I don't have a sweet tooth, so candy is not an incentive for me. Second, Halloween is one of those events that reminds me how at times I feel like a fish out of water in my new place. I had never heard of Halloween until I moved to the United States. I hear they celebrate it in Albania nowadays too, but when I was a child, the only thing remotely related to Halloween celebration was at springtime, when we would go around the neighborhood and ask for eggs and rice. We never received much, really. I have done a lot of reading about Halloween, but I have not done a lot of activities related to it. Let's see. Trick or treat? Never done. Halloween costume parties? The only part of a costume I have is an eye mask that my friend Helen Jordan bought for me. Apple bobbing? Never heard about it. Playing pranks? Oh, I so wish. Visiting haunted houses or watching horror movies? Hell no. Carving jack-o'-lanterns and lighting candles? Yes and yes. Then, how do I celebrate Halloween, or better say, what do I celebrate on Halloween night? Oh, I celebrate good weather that allows for a good walk while kids trick or treat. I celebrate the giggling of children approaching my door in all sorts of dream costumes and competing for candy. I celebrate my neighborhood, and most of all, I celebrate a good opportunity for my kids to create a lifelong memory, a memory that I will never have, but it will help them feel at home, belong where they are. Life is sweet, Andy. Till next time, and Kayla. Next episode will take you inside of an elementary school from first bell to dismissal time. I hope to see you again next week here on KPAO TV or online at newamericansmedia.com, our Facebook page, or our NAM YouTube channel. Hang in there, newcomers. I am Kayla Vepio.